going into this semi-final, in some ways are mild underdogs once again.
Saka is also potentially coming up against either Mickey van der Ven or Nathan Ake, who are better defenders than Michael Eberscher and Ricardo Rodriguez. Hello and welcome back to Monday Vibes, everybody. We are here to discuss the latest goings-on in a European Championships that really kicked off over the weekend with the quarterfinals. Lots of drama. We'll also be discussing some transfers. I'm joined by Mikey McCubbin. McCubbs, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good.
Busy weekend.
Very busy weekend. Lots of football. It does feel like, to be honest, for me, like international tournaments, actually, by the time the quarterfinals come about, they almost feel like they're a bit dead to me. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like for me, really, the international tournament's about like around the second game of the groups, and then last 16. By the quarterfinals, it's like, oh well, you know, there's just not really much you've got like 3 or 4 days between games. That the football becomes, I think, in some ways harder to watch because it's just so, no one wants to make a mistake. There's no underdogs left who have like nothing to lose. And we kind of saw that with France-Portugal, didn't we, on Saturday night? I think we saw it to an extent with England-Switzerland as well. Very few shots on goal from either side. But nevertheless, penalties on Saturday, what a way to win it, obviously got to be very, very happy with, where England are at this stage of the tournament, despite, not playing particularly well. We're still waiting for that real takeoff moment, aren't we? We may never get it. We may never actually get it with England. But should we get into England,
Let's do it.
Switzerland, and I guess really kind of preview the England-Netherlands game, because that was probably the most entertaining game of the quarterfinals. I think Spain-Germany was also decent, but Turkey-Netherlands was certainly the most kind of end-to-end game that we saw. I guess let's start with England-Switzerland, Dukes, because it felt like, especially in the first half, an improved performance in a new shape for England, or a revival of an old shape, I guess. But as that game went on, especially in the second half, we kind of saw the same trends creeping back into that England performance, and in the end, quite fortunate to make it into extra time.
Yeah, I think so. The second half definitely dipped quite considerably, but I was really buoyed by what I'd seen in the first half, to be honest. I thought the new shape, worked in effect, in that Mainu and Rice looked very comfortable as a midfield too, with that extra protection behind. I think it allowed Mainu to really cause a lot of damage in the opposition third as well. I thought Jude Bellingham looked really bright in this kind of free role on the left-hand side as well. And then Bukayo Saka, who we expected to play as a left wing-back, was phenomenal as a right wing-back, to be honest, and was causing constant issues to their left-hand side throughout the game. And England just seemed to have, it did drop in the second half, but a little bit more tempo in their play, a little bit more zip, a lot more two-touch stuff. And it was entertaining. It was entertaining. I was quite nervous going into the game, to be totally honest. I thought Switzerland had an excellent tournament, drawing with Germany, thrashing Italy quite comfortably in the previous round and the round of 16. So to make a Switzerland side limit them to very few real clear-cut opportunities until fairly late in the game was encouraging. With England, it's never really been free-flowing, sexy football. There's been a couple of games that stand out, in the 2018 World Cup, that big victory against Panama, but it was Panama. And, there was a lot of set-piece goals in that tournament, which kind of needs to be assessed at some stage. The England set-piece threat has just kind of evaporated entirely.
Absolutely gone.
And it was such a key asset. England beat Germany in the last 16 of the Euros in 2020, playing some reasonable football at points during that tournament, but it's never been this. People expect to see, because there's players from Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, that sort of style of play, and it's just not Southgate's style. It's not England. It's not international football, really, when there's so much more riding on it. You look at across games, as you say, the pressure, the fact that they don't have these telepathic relationships that you do have at club level, the fact that they're not so familiar with their opponents as well, it does lead to a different style of football. It's almost quite a different game in many ways. So I think we should stop expecting England to blow sides away and rack up 20 shots with 10 on target every game and 3 XG. It's just not going to happen. So I enjoyed what I saw from England against Switzerland. And then, yes, there were some nervy moments towards the end of that game as well. But Bukayo Saka popping up with just a sensational goal, really.
Amazing.
And he has been probably England's second best player over the last 5 years, really after Harry Kane, who is having a really difficult tournament.
I think he's been. But I was thinking this. I think in the Gareth Southgate era, I think probably only Jordan Pickford has a claim to have been better than Saka consistently across tournaments. I think Saka came into that side at Euro 2020, where he was actually a really crucial member of that side that got to the final. I can't really think of anyone who's been consistently as good. I thought he was excellent at the last World Cup as well.
Maybe John Stones prior to this tournament.
John Stones prior to this tournament as well. And I think you can put Harry Maguire in that category as well, of someone who's really not put a foot wrong. But in terms of an attacking threat consistently, Saka has just always been brilliant. And yeah, like, and in fact, his rise to supremacy as a right-sided winger, that was kind of happening around that Euro 2020 campaign. We didn't necessarily, Saka had only really come into that position around that time. And yeah, was just absolutely brilliant on Saturday. I thought, it felt logical for me for him to start on the left and Trippier on the right. And there were even points, in that first half where, the build-up again was getting a bit slow. And Saka was kind of, picking it up, kind of midway through the Switzerland half, and then cutting in straight away, passing it back to Rice, and it felt like it just felt a bit slow. But then the result of that patience was then, as long as we kept possession, Saka would then pick up the ball on the edge of the area, and every single time he made that attempt into the box, he got the better of his man. And, this is a Switzerland defence that has been very resolute throughout this tournament. Saka caused them so many problems. I think he ended the game with 4 dribbles out of 4. Just a really masterful display from him. And once again, it was a moment of inspiration that got England back into the game. And I think it feels like now there's almost more positivity around this England team, because it's almost like everyone kind of just expects us not to play particularly well now, but we do know that we have a world-class player who can produce something like that. And that's a risky strategy, but it seems to be the strategy, doesn't it? Jude Bellingham in the last game, Bukayo Saka in this game. England barely managed a shot on target in the box all game. I don't think they managed a shot on target until Saka's goal, which, again followed the trend of the Slovakia game, where we didn't see a shot on target until Bellingham's goal. I think England have only had 5 shots on target across the last, 240 minutes of football it is now they've played in the knockout stages. Like, it is, it is still a worry. I think I was looking at it. England rank for XG per 90 across this tournament. England ranked 21st out of 24 teams. Like people have a right. I think, yes, international football is different, but people do have a right to have a bit of a moan about this team, because given the quality of attacking depth that we have, to rank only above, I think, Albania and Scotland, and I can't remember who else. Like, it is like that's nowhere near good enough.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Netherlands in a second, and the Netherlands, scored 5 in the knockout stages. Generally speaking, their attack has been seen as something that isn't quite, still hasn't quite clicked consistently, and yet they rank 7th for expected goals per 90, and they have the joint top scorer and the joint top assister in the tournament in Cody Gakpo and Xavi Simons. So when you're going into this semi-final, going into this quarter-final, like, based on form and team cohesion, like, I considered England underdogs, and I think England going into this semi-final, in some ways, are mild underdogs once again, because we're still yet to see England consistently dominate a team across a 90-minute period, and they're playing against a team which will have played an hour less football going into this game in the knockouts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I just don't find it as frustrating as others, because it's nothing new. I expected this from England in many ways. I thought England were going to have quite a difficult tournament. I thought the absences of Maguire and Shaw were pretty massive. And the fact we're still experimenting with who was going to partner Declan Rice, the fact that, I mean, those are the key ones, to be totally honest.
For sure.
And the fact Kyle Walker maybe hadn't had as good a season as he's usually had at Man City going into major tournaments. Those are big key cornerstones of England's play. And yes, it has mainly come down to a lack of cohesion in attack, but everything has a knock-on effect in a football team. Like, if one area of your side is struggling, and it has been England's left-hand side, particularly with build-up in that area, then it does have a knock-on effect about, you know, how lethal and how ruthless players can be in front of that as well. It just causes so much uncertainty. And Maguire and Shaw, for all their difficulties, particularly Maguire at club level over the last few years, have been absolute rocks for England. So I'm not totally surprised. But in terms of the threats from Netherlands and how we can get over that as well, I'd be really surprised if he moved away from this formation now.
Yes,
having seen that performance. Gehi potentially coming back in for Ezri Konsa, who I actually thought had a very solid game, to be honest. Some of the defending was a little bit last ditch.
Very last ditch.
But
lots of space on that right hand side towards the end.
And I felt very nervous every time Switzerland came within sort of 40 metres of our goal. And given that they don't have the same quality in attack as the Netherlands do, it's going to be even more nerve-wracking on Wednesday. But I almost feel a sense of calm now. I do feel like we'd be underdogs in this semi-final against Netherlands. I think we'd be underdogs against either side in the final. And I think that's quite a refreshing attitude to have. I would be very surprised if England won the tournament from here. I'd be very surprised if England, you know, even reached the final, let alone put in a good performance there. And it is quite, let's just enjoy it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. And yeah, the nature of the victory, you know, the penalties, the opportunity. Obviously, you don't want it to go to penalties, but the fact that it did, and the fact that you had Cole Palmer, who's probably not played enough minutes this tournament, stepping up first and putting it away. The fact that you had Ivan Toney, who made such a decisive impact against Slovakia, also stepping up and, you know, carrying on his brilliant record. The fact that you had Saka, you know, exercising the ghosts of 2021.
What a moment.
You know, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who had a lot of stick earlier in the tournament, and, you know, taking that fifth pen, that pressure penalty. You know, there could have been a knives out moment there, and he stuck it away. And you've got to feel sorry for Manuel Akanji as well, who was like, I think might have been my player of the tournament up until the quarterfinals. He was so good, like such a brilliant defensive display from him throughout the tournament against some really tough sides.
And the fact it was the first one as well.
The first one as well, and it was a poor penalty. And yeah, I did feel for him, but what a way, you know, yeah, you do have to enjoy those moments massively. I guess you spoke about Luke Shaw. Let's touch upon him quickly, because, you know, he was brought in, you know, straight after Switzerland took the lead through what I thought was a really well worked goal. Actually, Breel Mbolo was a real threat throughout the game, as were a few others. You know, Shaqiri in particular, when he came on, looked really dangerous, didn't he? But Luke Shaw coming on, yeah. Do you think he should start against the Netherlands? Because I thought on the ball, he really brought something to this England team, as you expect. Defensively, we were all a little bit of a mess towards the end anyway, but defensively, I was a little bit alarmed. He did look like a player who hadn't played in months on the defensive end, but on the ball, he certainly, it felt like we just looked a lot more natural in build-up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he made a massive impact. Look, I'd love for him to start. I'd love for him to be fit enough to start, but, you know, without evidence enough of seeing how he's training at the moment, how he's recovered from that cameo at the weekend, you just don't know, because he's been out since March time.
Yeah, February was his last.
February, so even further back. So that's a real worry. But, you know, Trippier, he has really struggled in terms of what he's offering on the ball. As I say, I think Bellingham would be improved by playing with Shaw behind him. I think he'd also help with that sort of relationship between Trippier and Rice, which is a little bit uncomfortable at times, because Trippier always has to cut back in, and it does just slow us down in attack, and it does put so much pressure on Bukayo Saka. So it would be great to see him play there. Saka is also potentially coming up against either Mickey van der Ven or Nathan Ake, who are better defenders than Michael Eberscher and Ricardo Rodriguez. So Saka, look, he's playing phenomenally well at the moment, at least on the basis of that quarterfinal. He's had ups and downs during this tournament, but you don't expect him to be as impactful potentially against that whoever gets picked to play in that position.
And also on the other side, you're going to have Denzel Dumfries, potentially with Jeremy Frimpong coming on later. And okay, maybe that makes the argument for Trippier, because he's fitter and he generally has been fairly defensively sound throughout this tournament. But at the same time, having a left footer to counteract them overlapping down the right and going to the byline, Shaw is again a more natural fit to try and counteract that, especially if you have then a back three with Mark Gehi, who's such a superb left-sided centre-back, backing him up. That feels like that makes a lot of sense as well, but I don't know. That's less of a clear argument there. I'm not really
also,
100%
Trippier
on
makes
that.
a big error for their goal at the weekend, getting cut inside, and then it takes that nick off Stones and it lands perfectly at the feet of Mbolo. It was just a really scrappy goal. Stones should do better. Trippier should do better. It just wasn't a good moment. And with England struggling in attack so much, it feels like, you know, if Netherlands score 2, I just can't see England scoring 2 against this Dutch side, particularly if they're playing the way they are. Yeah,
and this is the thing. It's like we spoke about set pieces earlier as well, and actually, weirdly, despite having Van Dijk in there, despite having De Vrij in there, of course, scored that brilliant header against Turkey, they have struggled from set pieces, and I think half of Turkey's XG came from set pieces. If England had that in their locker, then that would be something. That would be somewhere where you can hurt this Dutch defence. But yeah, England don't really have that at the moment. It feels like we're playing down England's chances here. But
I think it's quite realistic.
But I think it is. Yeah, like I think, like on the evidence that we've seen so far in this tournament, it's just going to take some moments, and England just have to kind of hang in there. I think England's press has got to be, you know, kind of at the level that it was in the early stages of that Switzerland game, where I thought it looked really good. Like England's press needs to be superb against the Netherlands, especially in those early stages where your main objective is just to not concede early. I think that's going to be key.
Central midfield, I feel, is going to be massive as well. I feel like that could be an area that England get an advantage, because I think Tijani Reinders had a brilliant tournament, but Veerman's been up hot and cold. Shooting, you know, these aren't the players that they probably dream to have in that midfield. They'd want Frenkie de Jong, they'd want Teun Koopmeiners, but they're injured, they're missing the tournament. I think Reinders would probably have a chance to start, but Shooting and Veerman got substituted after 36 minutes against the Austrians. He'd misplaced something like over half his passes. It was just a disastrous display. He picked up in the last 16, but it hasn't been easy sometimes for Netherlands in central midfield. You know, prior to the quarter-final against Turkey at the weekend, Marco van Basten was saying we're struggling in attack, we're struggling in defence. Like, they are equally as negative about the Dutch side over there as we are about England. It's a strange semi-final in many ways, but this is what happens at major tournaments when France drop down into second in their group, end up on the wrong side of the draw. You know, the side people don't expect.
Just got to count ourselves lucky that it isn't France in this next round, because I think, regardless of form, I think you'd still rather play the Netherlands, given France's record at major tournaments over the last 10 years. Speaking of which, shall we just briefly touch upon France versus Spain? Yeah. Of course, it's happening tomorrow, so I mean, huge matchup. Is this the tie that you wanted in the semi-finals, do you think?
I think so. I think Germany, you know, performed admirably this tournament, but I think Spain have had more sort of take your breath away moments. They've probably been the side to watch. They've been the most entertaining. Look, Germany played phenomenally well in that opening game against Scotland, but a couple of their group games for long patches were a little bit of a struggle. That Denmark game, you know, Denmark had a number of chances. I mean, briefly touching on France-Portugal, because there's not much to say, really. I mean, the first half of that game, 0.15 XG in the entire half of football. Between the two sides. Absolutely crazy. It did slightly liven up in extra time, but it wasn't a great game by any stretch of the imagination. That suddenly came out very Scottish. But yeah, Jean-Felix missing the crucial penalty as well. Yeah. It's brutal when a player that's had a difficult season or a difficult few years, you know, misses a big moment. But yeah, France, far from their best again in attack. It feels like Mbappe is operating at half his capacity, really.
He just hates that mask, man. He clearly hates wearing that mask.
He then takes this block off. I can't remember who gives the ball in, maybe Bernardo Silva. Yeah. And clearly, getting hit in the head moves the mask on your nose. And his nose is clearly really not in a great state. It must be so painful. And he was obviously substituted before penalties, which was a big call from Deschamps. But France, unlike Spain, Mikey, have a much easier or less team concerns, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, like Carvajal, of course, getting sent off late on against Germany. I mean, I think he was already missing the semi through for a yellow, so in some ways he had nothing to lose there. Lenormand as well, suspended. Pedri most likely injured for this game, so it means that most likely they're going to have a 34-year-old Nacho and a 38-year-old Jesus Navas starting against France. I mean, both those players are, you know, have been fairly evergreen throughout their 30s. Like, you know, that's not, well, Carvajal to Navas is a big drop off. Let's face it. It is a big drop off. But
Navas won the 2010 World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Exactly. He's a winner. He's a winner. But no, like obviously it's a big drop off. It's a big drop off. But I do still just have faith in the Spanish system. Like it has been, we talk about kind of like international football and all this, that, and the other. But when you look at like actually how tactically advanced this Spain team has been, De La Fuente has clearly been the manager of this tournament, at least among the big nations. Absolutely brilliant. I do still have faith there, but yes, like France don't really have, no disciplinary issues to think about, no major injuries, aside from I guess like the effect of Mbappe's earlier injury on his kind of performances, his lack of luck in front of goal. But yeah, do you see are there any areas in this game which you think will define where it's won and lost? I mean,
Dani Olmo had such an amazing impact in this game, coming on for Pedri, who was injured in a really clumsy tackle by Kroos. I'm not going to go too hard on Kroos because I think it was an accident.
Last game of his professional career.
Yeah, but it was a really bad challenge and a real pain for Pedri, who's missed, I think it's over 80 games in his career so far, and he's only, 21, 22? That's really concerning. But Spain, I think it's worth noting that they were put under enormous amounts of pressure and adversity by this German side, conceding so late before the end of normal time to take it to extra time. I thought that was going to be a complete momentum shift. And even in extra time, Germany had a number of opportunities. Füllkrug with that huge header. Yeah. Havertz could have sort of chipped Unai Simon, who made an excellent save from Robert Andrich earlier on in the game as well. And also, we were all talking about, it's Lamine Yamal and it's Nico Williams. And Yamal did provide his third assist at the tournament, but they were stymied really effectively by first David Raum and then Mittelstadt on the left-hand side, and Kimmich had a great game as well, setting up Florian Wirtz for the equaliser. So Spain have been through adversity, losing a player like Pedri, Mikel Merino having to come on and score an amazing header, really, especially for a player that's not really known for his goal-scoring prowess. He's pretty complete in every other facet, but it was a huge moment. I am slightly concerned that France will rip up the script, introduce Giroud from the start, because I do think they're struggling without a sort of focal point. Play Mbappe off the left, and Mbappe, even at 50% fitness versus Jesus Navas, that could be really difficult for Navas. He's not played a lot of football for Spain this tournament. I don't think he's played any football for Spain this tournament. That could be a real difficulty. Nacho trying to contain Olivier Giroud as well, who I think always has the possibility of popping up with a big moment for France. Ousmane Dembele coming on to the pitch and actually making a huge impact in this game as well. Ended up with man of the match, albeit in a game without very much entertainment against Portugal. But I'm still backing Spain, but I think it's going to be an absolute classic. I think I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I thought Germany-Spain might have been an even better game than it was. I think France. It's really on France to step up in this game, I think. And I think Theo Hernandez versus Lamine Yamal is going to be absolutely fascinating. I think Theo Hernandez has had a really good tournament for France. But that's enough with the Euros chat. We've got a bit of transfer stuff coming in.
You've got to explain why you've got an extra spring in your step.
I guess we have had kind of some of our first, at least post-PSR deadline, some of our first kind of major news. It looks like Man United are increasingly confident. Well, they are increasingly confident of securing both Joshua Zirkzee and Matthijs de Ligt. Sky Sports News reporting this morning that there's increased optimism that a deal for Zirkzee will be finalised. It looks like the player is keen on the move, a broad agreement on personal terms, £34 million release clause. United are happy to pay it, supposedly, and it's just whether they'll be able to pay it in full or installments. I think there's kind of cash flow issues about whether paying it in full, which generally I think is the done thing, is to pay the release clause in full in this instance at least. That looks like it's almost going to be done. De Ligt as well, obviously we've heard a lot about this, but that again, at least on the player side, looks to be done, and it's just whether United are going to meet Bayern's valuation or whether they try and get more money off. But either way, it's looking like if these two deals get done, that United will be paying around the £80 million mark for the two players.
76, something like that.
Seems like, that seems like a pretty good deal. Obviously, we don't know exactly how much money in total United have to spend and this summer, and another central midfielder is certainly needed. There's talk about, there's an argument about left back, whether a new left back is needed. There's, again, you look on the wings, particularly on the right. Do United need more reinforcements there? In the long term, definitely. What do you think about these potential deals?
I love them. I think they're exceptional, to be honest. At that price point, particularly, young players, both under the age of 25. De Ligt obviously with more experience than Joshua Zirkzee, but Zirkzee has about 20 appearances under his belt for Bayern Munich and popped up with some useful goals on that. Had that spell at Anderlecht, which then secured a permanent move to Bologna and was brilliant last year, was Serie A Young Player of the Year. Very different profile to Rasmus Højlund, which I think is useful to have in your squad. Much more of a sort of Gabriel Jesus style forward than a sort of line stretcher, let's say. And De Ligt as well, with all that experience. There's a 60,000 fan petition which is being signed by Bayern Munich fans at the moment, arguing that the board shouldn't let him go, that he's their best defender. And they're potentially going to replace him with Jonathan Tah, who thrived at Bayer Leverkusen last season, but in a very different system. They are arguing, the Bayern fans, that De Ligt is their best defender. He's shown a lot of maturity. I think he's made interesting career decisions. He's never been afraid to test himself in new environments. He's worked under Ten Hag in the past. Alessandro Martinez has obviously worked under Ten Hag at 2 clubs as well. I think he massively raises the level of United's defence, if I'm totally honest, if they get him anywhere close to his best, which he didn't always show last year, to be completely fair. But he had a few injury issues, still young enough to bounce back from that. So much experience at a young age already. So I see Zirkzee as being a sort of bench option to initially start with, probably. But I see De Ligt going straight into that starting 11 and raising the bar quite significantly. And for a 70-80 million pound fee, the same fee that, Chelsea paid for Wesley Fofana, the same fee, 10 million euros less than they paid for Anthony. You can use countless players on this, but it does show they've got 2 quality additions, particularly De Ligt, for I think a really, really good fee. And I'm surprised Bayern are willing to let him go for so little. Yeah,
it does seem indicative of kind of Bayern's strategy at the moment. It just they continue to baffle, I think, in the transfer market. I know they got Palhinha in for a much lower fee than they were originally going for him last summer, but once again seems strange from Bayern. I guess the only concern from a United perspective is that we've got a new regime in place, and yet the first 2 signings that are being made is a defender who Ten Hag kind of brought into this world in many respects, and a Dutch striker who I imagine Ten Hag will have been tracking the progress of a lot in recent years. I haven't got the lowdown yet on what's happened behind the scenes with these moves, but my only worry would be that how much does are Wilcox's fingerprints over this? How much are Ashworth's fingerprints over this? Because in the long run, that's where United's transfer strategy needs to come from.
You'd imagine, I totally agree, but you'd imagine now they're officially in the door, both of them, that they would have had to have signed it. They'd have to have signed it off, surely, because you don't want your first few deals at a new club going, disastrously. So I can see that I can see your concern. It's a logical, connection.
But also, it's also, but they're also deals that have happened quite early in the window. Ashworth's barely through the door.
True.
Obviously, he signed them off, but they will have had to have had the confidence of them. But I still, it doesn't worry me. It would only worry me if this is how things, if United were to make similar signings moving forward. But I like Zirkzee as a player. I think, his goal output belies his overall ability, and we're yet to see him start consistently at in a Champions League. Well, not that United are a Champions League level side at this moment in time, but a side with real Champions League ambitions. I guess he did do that for Bologna last year. It will be interesting to see whether whether his long-term kind of position at United is as the backup to Højlund, or whether there is a world in which Zirkzee and Højlund can work together as a front 2. Højlund thrived alongside Alamola Lookman for Atalanta. Someone who is a bit more dribbly and picks up the ball from deep like Lookman does. Zirkzee has that ability, physically. I mean, that is a really imposing front 2. Both players kind of 6'3", 6'4".
Slightly different skill set as well.
Very different skill sets. Højlund's is someone who, really thrives on having space opened up for him, and Zirkzee is someone who certainly can do that. He can draw 2 or 3 players to the ball, loves a nutmeg. So like it's interesting times tactically for United going into the new season, if these 2 deals get done.
Could also lead to like improved form from Marcus Rashford, Joshua Zirkzee. I can see him, Zirkzee, dropping deep really effectively, pulling defenders out and playing balls through to Rashford or laying it off to Bruno, who then plays the ball through. So I mean that's crucial for United next year to get Rashford back to his best. Yeah, for sure, and I think it provides more competition there as well. I mean, not that Zirkzee is a left winger, but having him there, it's like, that there is the threat there to Rashford and even Garnacho, who I don't know, in some ways maybe I expect him to be playing on the right at the start of next season if United don't get in a right winger. But interesting times at Man United. I'm sure we'll be seeing more on the rumour mill and more concrete kind of transfer business being done as the Euros winds down. But I think that's all we've got time for on Monday Vibes today. It's a big week.
Yeah, big week. Get your predictions in for the semi-finals in the comments below. England fans, how are you feeling going into that semi-final? Are you feeling more positive than you were ahead of the quarters? Netherlands fans, what do you make of Ronald Koeman's side going into that semi-final as well, and of course Spain and France fans as well, although I feel like there are probably more Netherlands fans among our fan base potentially.
Yeah, maybe actually.
But nevertheless, we'll catch you on Sunday for Sunday Vibes, where I'm sure we'll be effectively previewing the final. Absolutely. And any other business.
Maybe doing a little team of the tournament or something.
That'd be nice actually. Maybe we will do that. But yeah, take care in the meantime and enjoy the semis. Catch you in a bit.